SM Entertainment has an issue when it concerns treating their male and female artists equally, to the point that they were forced to admit to these claims this year, vowing to make changes. One of these mistreatments that I've found as someone who stands the women of SM is the bizarre world of repackages, and how for some reason, every SM girl group with the exception of one, is treated to one single repackage for their entire career, and funnily enough, in all cases those repackages ended up being iconic moments of these artists' careers. Girls' Generation Z, FX's Hot Summer, and of course, the Queen we'll be discussing today, Red Velvet's The Perfect Red Velvet. On January 29, 2018, Red Velvet finally cashed in their one repackage ticket, expanding on their second album Perfect Velvet, creating their most perfect concoction that would play a major role in their career's identity moving forward, The Perfect Red Velvet. The title, The Perfect Red Velvet, is what it implies. Rather than just velvet, The Perfect Red Velvet is an infusion of both red and velvet to create a unique blend of identity on its own. As I discussed in my Horror Gone Camp video in relation to Really Bad Boy, The Perfect Red Velvet is essentially the earliest stage of the group's sowing the first few seeds of experimenting with their group's identity and sound to put forth a fresh take on their career. It's no coincidence that their next Velvet project, Really Bad Boy, would be experimental, playing around with both identities, and afterwards, the Rev Festival debuting. The Perfect Red Velvet births this clever idea that Red Velvet could be both red and velvet, at the same time blending their two sides, rather than leaning one way or the other. To be fair, this is an idea that can be traced back all the way to their first mini-album Ice Cream Cake and its double singles. Even fourth mini-album Rookie features velvet tracks despite being a red concept. However, the difference between these attempts and The Perfect Velvet lies within the visuals. This is one of those rare occurrences where the creative direction of an album was essential to the interpretation of the project, and I think despite the love Bad Boys era received to this day, the brilliance of this comeback is often not pointed out, given that people still refer to it as a typical Velvet comeback. It's not, and thinking it is funny enough why Bad Boy stans find themselves disappointed with every release after it. Perfect Velvet concept, or more specifically Peekaboos, is an indie horror film revolving around Red Velvet as a cult who sacrifice pizza men on every full moon. This concept follows through in The Perfect Red Velvet, but executed through a different medium. While still including elements of film design, The Perfect Red Velvet also finds inspiration in graphic novel design, as alluded to with the series 2, which could be found on the album cover and various designs. The graphic novel aspect is further emphasized by using a threshold technique throughout the promotional content and album package, which gives this sketched, 2D feel and complements the concept well. This is also established further with each girl having a character intro, invoking visuals that showcase the blending of red and velvet. Let's start with the color palette. What connects most Velvet concepts together is the use of intimate colors, that being black, red and most nudes. These colors, especially with color grading that leans warmer, used together can create a feeling of isolation. This, paired with the often barren set design tied within the realism of our world, is what creates the unsettling horror aspect of most of Red Velvet's Velvet works. This does not mean that other colors are not also featured, as shown in both One of Those Nights and Peekaboo, but it's important to note that these colors are featured on the girls themselves and both are intentional. The use of more lively colors in this styling is to humanize the girls themselves. Specifically in Peekaboo, the rainbow outfits are so colorful it reminds you more of the red side, playful and fun. This reflects in their interactions with the pizza boy, chasing him around the house and offering to blindfold themselves while eating Jello cakes. These rainbow and colorful outfits, so red in feel, are to disguise their true nature and intent, Of course, the Velvet. They appear to be friendly and nice to lure him into a false sense of security before eventually leading him to his death. This clever approach to Velvet is displayed in these character intros. We see a variety of bright vibrant shades that reflect the rainbow, contrasting what we've once known Velvet to be. They are redefining the look of Velvet right before our eyes, taking colors we associate with their red side and showcasing them in a new light. To me, this is another reason why the character introductions exist. Opposed to before, where you can distinctly tell the difference between red and velvet with the fusion of both, you are introduced to brand new women. Another way they drive home this new identity is with their actions as well. Something to note is that both red and velvet share elements with different execution, creating a consistency in RV's artistic identity even through a revolving concept. One of these is the use of food within their visual work. While red concepts will often feature sweets, velvet concepts will feature more savory foods. Wendy is seen with a raspberry in her mouth, while in Joy's intro she's taking a bite face first into the cake. Introducing sweets to the rather savory and spicy world of Velvet is more evidence of the two sides meeting. It's important to note that this further aids to the illusion of red and peekaboo as well, with the simple fact that the girls invite the pizza boy in to eat such a silly, vibrant sweet treat such as Jell-O. This is an oddity in their Velvet work and would have no reason to belong in peekaboo if the whole point wasn't to create an illusion of being playful, therefore red. More actions that I feel are not discussed enough in regards to discourse surrounding both Velvet editions, is the act of hyper-femininity and how that further helps to the interpretation of illusion that both albums promote strongly. In Peekaboo, we see the girls portray themselves in a very stereotypical, flirty feminine light. There's a bit of a feminist authorial intent with the way they behave, but in order to comprehend it, I think it's best to discuss femininity in horror. My first thought in relation to femininity in horror is the Scream Queen, which is best defined by Cambridge Dictionary as a female actor who plays a main character in a horror movie who gets frightened or attacked, or the character she plays. The term derives from the common trope of women doing a high-pitched scream during the chase and/or attack in horror films. If this sounds familiar, your brain might be making the connection to Really Bad Boy, which featured this trope in the actual song. I spoke at length about the connection between the two, but let's take it a little deeper. Anyone, and especially those who identify more on the feminine scale, have awareness of femininity being society's biggest sin, and I think no other media showcases this better than horror films. The high-pitched scream is a sign of weakness, a call for help out of terror for a woman to be saved by someone stronger than herself. The men in these movies, while also being portrayed as frightened, tend never to adopt this method of expressing themselves, rather being portrayed as being logical and less emotional in the stress of the moment. This is typically a talking point used to further bolster misogyny and demonize femininity. Women are too emotional to think in high-pressure situations, and that is what leads to their downfall. Men, who are less emotional, are able to survive simply because they can put emotions aside to assess the situation and come to a solution. It's also another form of victim blaming in certain contexts. Another way femininity is often showcased and demonized is by showing women who are or implied to be promiscuous as the victims of eventual killings. The best example I've ever seen of this exists in the 1996 slasher film Scream, in which the intro features a young girl named Casey Bigger, played by the iconic Drew Barrymore. Casey is pestered by an unknown number at her home and at first does the logical thing by hanging up. After retrieving the anonymous call again, the man convinces her to stay on the line and builds up a quick flirtation with her. Casey thus lets her guard down, engaging in banter until his true intentions are revealed. Sure, the point could be made that had she not picked up the phone, she could be dead regardless, but the inclusion of the flirtation is intentional framing to the purpose of her death. Casey is the innocent girl next door, the image of femininity, and to have her last few moments be her behaving flirty, even down to the hair twirling, is meant to show what happens to women who dare to align themselves too closely to femininity. Even in the moments before the attack, Casey resorts to lying about having a boyfriend who's strong and will eventually be there to protect her. She's too weak to defend herself, she's too naive not to pick up the phone again and flirt with a stranger on the other end. Weakness, naivety and promiscuity, basically, this is the three horsemen of misogyny. It's interesting to see as the years go on, How this misogyny slowly trickles into the pieces of media we consume past that point. I know it seems like we're going a bit off the rails here, but trust me, this all ties back in. This shaming and punishing women for participating in behavior deemed not appropriate by men continues on to a new generation. Before I begin, I do believe that colors are genderless in nature, understand the history of the color pink, and try my best not to subscribe to heteronormativity as a fan lesbian. However, for the purposes of this slight deep dive, I will be referring to pink as a color associated with femininity. In the early 2000s, a trend began to rise amongst the media that was being released that would have a massive effect on the psychology of many young girls growing up. Suddenly, the main characters went from stylish and your all-American girly girl to embracing more traits, styling and ideals that would align more with masculinity. Now, this inherently on its own is not an issue. Femininity shouldn't be defined by one thing, and women are allowed to operate outside of the box that society has forced us into. The issue is that rather than this being a situation in which we rose together to redefine what being a girl was, we decided to sin women's rights a million years back by employing the mass vilification of the girly girl and thus, the color pink. All of a sudden, the villains of your typical teen show or straight-to-DVD movies adopted this hyper-feminine persona paired with a nasty attitude and sense of entitlement. This also existed with the explosion of tabloid journalism that further drove home this idea by labeling women who lean more feminine and flirty as bimbos such as Paris Hilton, Lindsay Lohan, Britney Spears, and many more. The girly girl was seen as a woman who was vapid, vain, and viscous. This image was even promoted in music, singer Pink being the face of this phenomenon we have now dubbed "I'm not like other girls." This caused massive damage to many young women of my generation who later grew up and matured, acknowledging the internalized misogyny they were holding and even admitting to pretending to hate the color pink in order to distance themselves as much as possible from the girly girl image. This discourse created a healthy discussion about the media we consume, how society hates teenage girls, and how we were all raised to hate ourselves and each other for male attention. It's then when the tide began to shift. The rebranding of the word bimbo as well as the color pink came crashing in just in time for my favorite personal trend I'd like to describe as man-hating. Now with this context, especially in relation to Perfect Velvet's intent, the perfect red velvet takes this rebrand even further. The perception of women in the color pink has long been in the hands of men, and Red Velvet plays around with this in their styling. We see a cross between textures that have different connotations over time. Joy, Wendy, and Irene are in this soft, baby pink fur coat which is meant to represent being soft, gentle, and even classy. However, the entire group legs are strapped in fishnet stockings. Fishnet stockings have been sexualized for years, being associated with women who are seen as trashy and not virtuous. By combining these two textures, the perception of the woman is now muddy. Is she a slut? Or is she pure? We can't tell, and that's the point. How a woman dresses should not define who she is in relation to societal standards that we do not place on men, or in this context, the bad boys. The techwear slipped in between some of their outfits can be representative of strength. Even though their attire may lean more feminine, they are still strong regardless. The color pink is also used cleverly here to mirror how interpretations of the color could lean depending on the shade. As stated before, more lighter shades of pink are associated with purity and innocence, while more vibrant shades such as hot pink are seen as lustful, slutty, and borderline trashy. These two interpretations are showcased in the styling, and it doesn't stop with the styling. In Joy's intro, she's seen sucking on a lollipop, an action that has also been extremely sexualized by men. What's interesting is that she's doing this while in a light shade pink dress, a representation of innocence. She's challenging what's seen as acceptable. In Irene's intro, she's seen blotting her lips. It immediately reminds me of Mean Girls and Katie's transformation into what she set out to destroy. This could be interpreted as Irene set with the same mission, whereas rather than destroying another woman, Irene sets out to destroy a man by channeling her inner femininity. It's a small action, but using vanity in a way of empowerment, rather than an act that requires punishment, gets the point across beautifully. There are more symbolisms of perception and the goal to destroy it in the trailers and music video as well. In Selgi's intro and in Wendy's scenes in the music video, a camera is seen in use and later engulfed in flames. A camera works in the same way we do, capturing moments of our daily lives through a lens, and the perception of the photos taken can change depending on who's viewing. By setting the camera ablaze, it tells us that the girls do not wish to be perceived. You can even argue that the fact Wendy takes a picture of us, or in the context of the music video The Bad Boy, it's almost like a role reversal. How does it feel to be the one being perceived instead? She's also the one to break the surveillance camera, another eye in the sky basically. Even in the individual trailers, there's a heavy emphasis on the girl's eyes, and Yeri is also seen spraying red spray paint across the mannequin eyes. The transition from black and white to vibrant hues in the final opening trailer also aids to this message of perception and Velvet meeting Red to create the ultimate woman who is both sexy, confident and mature like Velvet but cutesy, bubbly, bold and fun like Red. The album packaging for the perfect Red Velvet birthed an interesting story that furthered my belief about physical albums being an art you need to experience yourself rather through the lens of someone else. See, the perfect Red Velvet was an album long requested for me to break down, and typically, especially with Red Velvet, I prefer to have the physical package in my hands in order to interpret everything to its fullest intent. I was browsing last month and had noticed it was in stock and just took it as a sign to purchase. As I typically do with albums, I made sure to check out the preview just to get a scope of what to expect, and it was there that I stumbled onto something that furthered my interpretation for the album. There in the album preview was 2 pages, on the right was frames of Yeri but on the left was a single freeze frame of a cartoon lamb with weapons surrounding it. Immediately I was perplexed, as I had been in a Red Velvet creative direction deep dive since joining the fandom in late 2018, and I have never seen this fucking lamb anywhere. It wasn't in the promotional content, and because it wasn't a shot that included the girls visually, of course the page was never scanned. Due to the unique name of this album, in 2023, it's nearly impossible to bring up archived discourse surrounding the perfect Red Velvet that took place as it was releasing. Any keywords will immediately flood results with Perfect Velvet, and searching about discourse about Bad Boy would be pointless because, as I said, the lamb wasn't featured in promotional content. Even in the most popular unboxing video of the album, it wasn't mentioned. At this point, I was excited to get my album to investigate, and I am thrilled to reveal the origins. I hope you'll excuse my terrible photography, but as these pages have never been scanned, I feel like I'm unearthing lost media over here. Pages 6, 19, 28 and 31 will treat you to mysterious freeze frames of a lamb that is only found in the perfect Red Velvet's photo book. Who is this lamb? What cartoon is this? Where is it from? The frames come from a cartoon called Mighty Mouse, a cartoon that originated in the 1940s. This episode is titled Wolf, Wolf, and displays the story of greedy wolves who pretend to be Little Bo Peep and capture a lamb in preparation to kill it. The freeze frames shown happen when the wolf hypnotizes the lamb with the sound of music, earning its trust before trapping them. When they are trapped, the lamb is surrounded by various weapons and pleads for its life to deaf ears. It's only when Mighty Mouse swoops in, that the lamb is saved from the big bad wolves. There's so much interesting about this cartoon short. First, to begin, never did I ever think that something that hadn't been pointed out to my knowledge up to this point would actually serve as the confirmation to my analysis. The wolf quite literally dresses up as a woman, with an exaggerated bust and everything, in order to trick the lamb into believing he's Little Bo Peep. In the same way the girls trick men into thinking they are sweet and harmless, only to show their true intent. In the freeze frame in the album, there are 5 weapons pointed at the lamb, so it was very much intentionally included. It's important to note that even when the disguise fails and the lamb raises the wolf's dress and sees that it's no woman, it still gets lured back by the sound of music. This is quite literally the whole premise of Bad Boy, the actual song. The boy is literally lured by the sound of the music. In one part Wendy even says, "Don't pay attention to anything else, just follow the sound of my voice," and this essentially happens in the cartoon. The lamb, despite seeing evidence of the wolf being deceptive, still follows the wolf's music blindly. The frames of the lamb running remind me of the pizza boy in Peekaboo running away. It's such a role reversal that the bad boy in question is the small innocent lamb, soft and sweet, while the girls are the cunning ones who trick and deceive with their femininity. It's very telling that the team chose not to include any shots of Minnie Mouse, who was the savior of this story. This is what I was speaking of, the feminist authorial intent. Because we are only shown the frames of the lamb in distress, the entire story is recontextualized for this album. It's extremely clever. I even noticed that the frame of the weapons being pointed at the lamb was used twice. The freeze frame is inverted, with a picture of Wendy covering the lamb. However, don't be tricked. This is yet another ploy by the girls to play with our perception. Wendy wants to make you believe that she's the helpless little lamb, but that's simply not the case. In the music video, it's very telling that the girls are seen with a book that reads in French. This is not a lip reference to the painting The Treachery of Images by Belgian surrealist painter René Magritte, which shows a picture of a pipe with the words below saying this is not a pipe. The reference also aids in the message of perception. The painting is not a pipe, it's just a painting of it, as stated by him, the famous pipe. How people reproached me for it. And yet, could you stuff my pipe? No, it's just a representation, is it not? So if I had written on my picture this is a pipe, I'd have been lying. According to History of Art, the purpose of the terminology in the title and therefore the piece could be that we constantly need to tell ourselves lies in order to make sense of the world around us. Rather than a pipe, we are treated to a pair of lips. Lips are considered to be the eyes into your personality and are also synonymous with sexuality. If you've been paying attention, the entire point is to break the perception of femininity and thus, sexuality and what's expected of a woman. This is not a lip, simply saying that this is a representation of femininity, but not to be fooled to think this is what femininity is. This is femininity as promoted through the male gaze. It's what we've been sold and packaged neatly to fester in our brains as internalized misogyny. Like Treachery of Images reminds the viewer to think of the alternative, that this is not a lip book reminds the girls that they too need to see femininity outside of what men have told us femininity is. It's why Yeri was typing in bad boy, she's rewriting what it means. This inclusion is also why the girls appear to be sleeping, as according to the Daily R magazine, the piece represented the reaction at the time in Europe to justify or rationalize the horrific events of the First World War. It attempted to join the realms of dreams and fantasy to the everyday world. Now back to Mighty Mouse's Wolf, Wolf. It's important to note that the freeze frames used in the photobook are also up for sale as stock video. I found it first before eventually being led to the original cartoon. However, I'm almost certain its inclusion is intentional given Manhegan's love for this style of art, hence the new jeans bunny style and the fact that it was used in photo form rather than its original video form. I do also wonder which video did the creative team stumble on as well. I'll link the video I found. Its recording messed up and it created this genuinely eerie, scary moment where the video glitches out. It sort of reminds me of the character intros. This was genuinely such a nice find, and the random details that further emphasizes how an album's package can also play such an important role in the execution of story and concept. The photobook is gorgeous outside of that constantly flipping between both photo shoots organized for this album. The other concept set includes soft, isolated photography of the girls in these ripped, almost punk-inspired outfits paired with fishnet undergarments. The photos are gorgeous and are meant to emulate the same feel of photography from film. In film photography, the vintage lens causes a bloom effect, creating this rather ethereal and dated look opposed to digital photography, which aims to be as precise as possible. The bloom effect is only used in this concept set, which makes the girls look rather soft despite being in attire more fitting for a bad girl with a weapon or helmet in hand to match. Like everything else, this is further symbolism of perception, with everything learned. More details organized in the music video also aid to the overall message of reclaiming what femininity is, hence why despite being named Bad Boy, the music video is solely focused on the girls themselves. There's even a shot where Solgi is pointing a gun, but when the shot pulls away, it's at nobody. Bad boy is simply the concept of men who further perpetuate these false ideals and standards for women rather than an actual boy. The styling choice to put the girls in school uniform, an outfit that's the ultimate display of innocence and naivety but quickly came sexualized for that same reason, and that sexualization is showcased with the additional accessories that make the set look more grown up. Another example of this would be Yeri on the unicorn floaty, which feels rather childish to her bad girl outfit, and what she is doing, literally typing, rewriting still. Even with the ending, the simple fact that when the girls are in the black outfits, they are dancing in the pink mountains. This styling is much more mature and makes them look fiercer, and the mountains represent that reception of that. Women who lean more fierce rather than submissive are often seen as cold. It's telling that although they could have ended the music with that final pose, we cut to the girls in bed, in baby pink pajamas. This is a juxtaposition to what we've just seen. Here they look soft, and being in bed is associated with warmth. In the beginning, we see this as well with the black outfits in the bed, but in the cold. In the end, the whole point of the perfect red velvet is the journey to redefine what red velvet is, and that encompasses destroying the perception of not only them but also what femininity is. No matter what form of womanhood you adopt, you are allowed to find your true self as well, and to be broken out of male perception.